Hey everybody, welcome back to Movies You Missed Podcast, episode 106. Vee, how's it going?
I'm doing well today, John. Definitely pumped after watching these two gangster films. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm very excited to discuss these gangster movies tonight. Gangster films are definitely on my favorite types of films to watch, especially the Scorsese gangster movies, but none of these are actually Scorsese gangster films, so I'm excited to get into a non-Scorsese type of a gangster episode.
Yes, me too, even though gangster films aren't usually a genre I gravitate towards, mostly because all the characters are irredeemable and horrible.
Exactly.
But I certainly had a great time this week watching these two.
As did I, and I can't wait to get into them. But before we do that, for those of you that are brand new to Movies You Missed Podcast, this is our 106th episode. Welcome to Movies You Missed Podcast. I'm John, and you have just met Vee. We spent 25 years in the entertainment industry, production, stunts, several other departments as well, even sometimes in front of the camera. So if you're curious what we've been in front of the camera for, send us a message on social media, and maybe we'll tell you.
John will send you some of the screenshots of me being on camera, because I don't normally send those out.
Well, I do have them. I've saved them for just such an occasion. Other than that, Vee and I have been friends for a very long time. And with this podcast, we like to discuss movies that we feel have flown under the radar, movies that have been forgotten, or movies that Vee and I just want to revisit, which has been a complete blast over these last 106 episodes. And the one thing that we do not do here at Movies You Miss Podcast is spoil any of the movies that we discuss here on the podcast. So you will never find out what happens at the end of a movie if you're listening to an episode of ours.
And that includes new movies we saw in theaters this week.
That's right. No spoilers, especially for the movies that we just saw in theaters or on streaming this week. So I'm curious, Vee, what did you see?
I had the pleasure of going to Mystery Movie Monday, hosted at Cinemark Theaters, and they were showing Boy Kills World.
Nice.
It is a new rated R action flick starring Bill Skarsgård, Famke Janssen,
Hey.
Charlton Copley,
Oh, snap.
and some other folks you would recognize. It was so much fun. This movie is bonkers, though.
Oh, yeah?
There's a crazy internal monologue of the main character, voiced by the man who voices Archer.
Oh, H. John Benjamin.
Yes, which was fun the entire movie. But if Quentin Tarantino did a bunch of meth and was asked to design a movie based off a video game, that would be this movie.
Oh, sweet.
It was so crazy. It was fun. It was ridiculous. It was out of this world. It was extremely bloody.
Great.
And it was a fun revenge film. I had just a great time watching this movie from start to finish.
Awesome. Was the theater pretty packed?
It surprisingly was. I didn't know what to expect. I'd never been to a Mystery Movie Monday before.
Ah.
And the tickets are only $5, so I was really stoked about that too. But
Yeah.
there were like 20 people in the theater. I was pretty impressed.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I am looking forward to that movie. I've only seen it advertised. I haven't seen a trailer for it, so I'm definitely going to have to check it out when it's finally released.
It's actually going to be released this weekend. It comes out the 26th.
Well, then I guess I know what I'm doing this weekend.
Exactly. So highly recommend. I think you'd enjoy it a lot.
Sweet.
Yeah, and I believe you saw a movie this week as well, or at least one.
I did. I actually saw two movies.
Nice.
One of them was actually on Friday night, opening night of Abigail. My wife wanted to see it, so I of course wanted to see it. I liked the trailer and thought it looked like a good time, so we went and saw that opening night. But Abigail was a complete and utter blast. I had a great time. Amy liked it, but she didn't love it. She said that she could have waited for streaming for it, but at the same time, she kind of thinks that movies should still be viewed in movie theaters, so I love my wife for that. But I thought the movie was great. Didn't really know where it was going based off the trailer. I kind of thought I did, but it didn't go that direction at all.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was
Okay.
it was a surprise. And Alicia Weir, who plays Abigail, she's going to be showing up a lot, I think. She was really, really good.
Nice. I'm really excited to see that film.
Yes, highly recommended, especially if you are a vampire fan. It's pretty bloody, it's got some brutal moments, and it's also got some hilarious moments. So it's definitely worth checking out.
Well, I will certainly be giving it a watch, hopefully this weekend.
Awesome. And then just a few days after that, I went and saw Alex Garland's new film, Civil War, starring Kirsten Dunst. And this was a pretty intense movie. I drove home in complete silence because I needed to marinate on what I had just seen and what I had just experienced in those last 2 hours. It's very well written. It's very well shot. The music is great. It's got a bit of Nightcrawler vibes also. A lot of moralistically fucked situations in Civil War, but Overall, definitely a thumbs up movie. See it in theaters if you have any interest in seeing it. It deserves a theatrical viewing before it comes out on streaming. I really enjoyed the movie, and I think it's going to start a lot of conversations.
Great.
Yes. Well, fantastic. As we've been saying here for a very long time and will continue to say, please keep going to the theaters, keep movies alive, keep movie theaters alive. And V, I think it's time to lift prohibition. What do you say?
I think that's a great idea.
Fantastic. Why don't you take it away for episode 106?
All right. For this episode, as we've said, it's a gangster-themed episode. Instead, I chose the 1987 gangster classic directed by Brian De Palma, starring Kevin Costner, Sean Connery, Robert De Niro, and a whole host of other great actors. This is The Untouchables.
Oh,
which John had never seen before.
I had not seen The Untouchables.
And I have a sneaky suspicion he didn't like it, folks, so we're going to see after I describe this movie to you all what that verdict is.
We shall.
All right. The Untouchables is actually based on a biography written by Elliot Ness, a Treasury officer from the 1930s. This movie takes place at the end of 1930, and Elliot Ness has been assigned to Chicago. And during that time in Chicago, not only was prohibition a thing, because it was actually the law of the land in all of the United States. Thankfully for John, that was repealed.
Yeah.
And prohibition, for those of you who had an American education, that was when the United States outlawed all alcohol.
So stupid.
So dumb. And of course, the natural thing happened. It just went underground and everybody kept drinking.
Yeah.
So Chicago became owned by the mob, most prominently by Al Capone. And in that, there was tons of corruption, bribery, and it was also basically a war zone with rival gangs fighting each other on the streets.
Oh, yeah.
Because of the increase in crime, the Treasury Department sends Elliot Ness to Chicago to try to cool things down. And Elliot Ness is a total square.
Yeah.
No, in a good way, though. He doesn't take bribes, he doesn't take drinks because he says it's illegal, so he won't do it. And he's a real straight arrow, and that's what you needed. But unfortunately, during that time, that also meant he was extremely unpopular with all the other cops.
Very much so.
So in the beginning of this movie, Elliot Ness trying to fulfill this mandate of stopping Al Capone, stopping a lot of illegal shipments of alcohol coming into the city, he's very lonely. He doesn't have a lot of coworkers. He doesn't have a lot of support. And watching these two movies together this week, it really highlighted how many similarities there are in the storylines.
Definitely.
Which was great. It ended up being a perfect pairing, I think.
I completely agree.
And we'll get into that a little bit more when you discuss your pick this week. But back to The Untouchables, Elliot Ness's first order of business is recruiting some folks to his team who he can trust. And one night, after a bust goes very poorly, and Elliot Ness has actually been embarrassed publicly and in the newspapers with this, he's standing on a bridge late at night and he gets really frustrated after reading the newspaper with his face on it and throws it into the river, and this beat cop comes by and goes, "What the hell are you doing littering?"
Yeah.
On my couch, I said the exact same thing. I was like, not cool, man. I hate littering so much.
Oh, really? Oh.
Yeah, it's, I think, so rude, completely inconsiderate to our planet, and also extremely lazy.
It is a bit lazy. Amy won't let me spit my gum out of the car anymore. Like, I've got to put it in my wrapper and in the trash can in the car that I have.
Yeah, a bird could eat it, and then it could die.
Oh, okay. I didn't think a bird would eat gum, but I guess I wasn't thinking, so I don't do it anymore.
The more you know.
At least 2 weeks. Yeah, right?
Exactly. And it turns out that this beat cop, after giving Elliot Ness a bunch of shit, is actually Sean Connery.
He looked familiar.
He really did. It's his voice, man. So recognizable.
Don't you litter.
Exactly.
That was my terrible Sean Connery.
I love your Sean Connery accent.
Oh, thank you.
I think you should do it more often.
All right.
And Elliot Ness says to him, "God, aren't there more important things you could be doing?" And he says, "Well, couldn't you?" And
yeah.
It's true. He's like this cop that's super down on himself, just standing there. And that actually starts this friendship with Sean Connery's character of Jim Malone and Elliot Ness, played by Kevin Costner. And lo and behold, that's his first recruit. And Sean Connery's been around the block. He's literally, because he's a beat cop, but also figuratively, because he's seen some shit in Chicago. And the reason why he's still a beat cop is because he doesn't take bribes, and so none of the guys on the force trust him. So he's never been promoted, which is perfect for Elliot Ness. And Jim Malone actually becomes a bit of a mentor to Elliot Ness and really helps him navigate Chicago and the police force, since Ness is not originally from Chicago. And they go about recruiting more folks to this team, which means they actually go to the police academy to recruit their next team member. And that's where we get Andy Garcia playing George Stone. the best shooter in his class. And I love how Jim Malone and George Stone become friends. Because it's a very confrontational beginning, but you can tell immediately there's a lot of respect there. Lastly, Elliot Ness recruits an accountant to his team, and now the four of them are ready to take down the mob, led by Al Capone.
Yeah.
Who is played wonderfully by Robert De Niro in this movie. At least that's my opinion, but we'll get John's in a minute, apparently. And Al Capone is pretty brutal. There's a scene that actually takes place at a restaurant where all of his guys are sitting in a circle around a table.
Oh, yeah.
And this is after a raid that Elliot Ness has done, when he actually starts finding the alcohol that's coming into Chicago and really being a thorn in Al Capone's side. And because of this failure, Al Capone pulls out a bat and beats a guy to death with it.
Oh, yeah. That was pretty insane.
And I really thought that scene was necessary because Al Capone throughout the movie is really portraying himself as a good guy, as a businessman. He's legitimate. The press loves him. The city loves him. And showing the violence that Al Capone actually was capable of, I thought was really important to the story, establishing him as the villain, showing that it's important to actually take him down.
Yeah, that was actually a moment in the movie that I was kind of completely taken aback by. I did not anticipate it. Again, this is my first time seeing The Untouchables. And I liked the dialogue. I liked how he breaks everything down and, he's like, we're all a team, and then just starts whopping on the guy. And everybody at the table is also just like, holy fuck. Like, yeah, everybody's just kind of looking around like, what the hell is going on? And yeah, I thought that was a very well executed scene.
And now that Elliot Ness has this ball rolling, the rest of the movie is Ness and his team not only continuing to turn down bribes while they're trying to go after Capone, but also trying to protect themselves and their families because everyone's put in harm's way when they actually try to dismantle this system of corruption.
Of course.
And there's a lot of reasons I really love this movie. I like Brian De Palma as a director. I love the score by Ennio Morricone. I really like the acting. I think the storyline is really cool. It has a very 30s vibe, even though it was made in 1987. It feels like a classic movie. I love the grandeur of it. I love the wide shots of these very old buildings. It feels like it's actually taking place in the 30s. All of the props, all of the sets were very beautiful, very meticulous. It felt very authentic to me.
There was a lot of really good visualization in this movie, for sure.
And before I actually get into the cast and the trivia of this movie, I'm dying to know John's take on it.
All right. Well, here we go. I do not support prohibition in any way, so that was one thing I liked about the movie, was the underground drinking and everything. It reminded me of Some Like It Hot, and I like the whole speakeasy thing, especially in, like, that's kind of having a resurgence these days, it seems like, especially because we're in the quote-unquote roaring 20s of the 2000s now, and there's a lot of speakeasies popping up. Really dark speakeasies. Vee, I took you to one.
You did.
Yeah, a lot of fun. This movie has been on my radar since, I think, right around the time I saw Goodfellas, and everybody's always talking about The Untouchables. I knew so many people that were always like, oh, you got to watch The Untouchables. You got to watch The Untouchables. And the reason why I never did watch The Untouchables was because Kevin Costner was in it. I don't like Kevin Costner as an actor. I never really have. I like Field of Dreams. I have been meaning to watch Dances with Wolves again. Maybe I will at some point. It's one of those staples of American cinema, as is The Untouchables. So I was excited to finally watch The Untouchables, especially for the podcast, because I love gangster movies. I like movies set in the 1930s. I love De Niro. I like Sean Connery. I'm kind of an Andy Garcia fan. I'm not. I don't. He's not a reason why I would go see a movie, but I don't not like Andy Garcia. But I got to tell you, V, this is one of the worst gangster movies I've ever seen. And I'm not trying to be funny. I'm not trying to be mean. I loved the opening of the movie. When Capone's getting the shave. I loved that whole conversation with him and the reporter, especially when the guy shaving him cuts him.
Yeah.
And he's like, it's all right. And he just keeps talking. He's got the blood on his finger. I was waiting for him to cut the guy's throat. There was a lot of great tension in that sequence. Loved the bar opening with the guy that leaves the briefcase behind. I thought that was awesome and a great way to really bring you into the movie. And then Kevin Costner shows up. I have never seen a more pussy type of a cop in my life other than Elliot Ness. Now, nothing against the actual man. I'm very curious about potentially sometime maybe reading his memoir to see if it's any better than this movie. I thought the pacing was really bad, and not because it's from the 80s. I think that's a Brian De Palma thing, because
yes, it is.
I don't know what he does in the editing room, but he lingers far too long on scenes that, in my opinion, need to be a lot quicker, especially the elevator scene in this movie. I couldn't help but laugh. in the elevator scene. I hated the elevator scene so much, especially when the dude with the glasses gets it, because he's like, like he just like does this really weird inhale surprise. I don't know. I thought Ennio Morricone's score was comical and awful.
Wow, I didn't see coming.
I really just did not like it, and I didn't want. I'm not trying to be harsh.
No,
at all.
Please.
Maybe it's because Goodfellas and Casino and so many other gangster films out there actually, and like The Godfather, even though The Godfather is an hour longer than this movie, The Untouchables, there isn't a pacing problem, in my opinion. And I could not get into any of these characters, including Sean Connery's character.
Really?
I was completely like, what is he doing in this movie? Why is he in this movie? And then, of course, when I see the credits and it's directed by Brian De Palma, I'm going through my Rolodex of movies that I've seen of Brian De Palma's, and I hate Scarface, which I know you also are not a fan of.
Correct.
And one of the last movies I saw of Brian De Palma's that I saw in theaters was a movie that everybody was just super excited about, just ready for. Josh Hartnett, Aaron Eckhart, Scarlett Johansson. A movie set in the 30s called The Black Dahlia. And that movie was one of the worst pieces of garbage that I remember, like, just left the theater just so upset about that movie.
Yes.
And then I was just kind of like, oh man, it's Brian De Palma. You know what? I'm not going to worry about it because he directed Mission Impossible.
Right.
And Mission Impossible's fantastic. There's no pacing problems in Mission Impossible.
That's true.
But yeah, I really did not enjoy this movie at all. And I've told a lot of people, because I always post on my social media what I'm watching for the podcast, and everybody, not everybody, I mean, you know, a handful of people are like, oh, I love that movie. And I'm like, this movie is not a good movie. Again, my opinion. Can't wait to hear what Gavin on Twitter says.
Oh, that's true, yes.
He's a loyal listener, and I gotta say, his last comment about my Auld Lang Syne and Sound of Metal was, it really made me laugh. So if you're a fan of The Untouchables, man, this is not a movie that I enjoyed at all. And it's crazy, because it is 2 hours long, and after this movie ended, I wanted to watch Casino, because Casino's 3 hours, and I wanted at least 3 hours of good after the 2 hours of bad. So, V, I do apologize, but I think this is one of the first movies that I've truly hated that you've chosen on the podcast. And I was about 15 minutes from finishing this movie, and I had my phone in my hand, and I had a text written, "You really want to go with this movie?"
I don't know why you didn't veto it.
I couldn't veto it. It was we were getting close to recording, and I didn't want to break your heart, and I didn't want to, you know, I wanted to. I also kind of wanted to have a movie that I didn't enjoy on the podcast, and not because like I deserve that. It's
a good conversation.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's a good conversation. So I thought the entire cast was terrible, but a few things that I did like I said, opening with De Niro was great, getting shaved. The whole thing with the bar was fantastic, and I really liked how after the whole raid gone bad at the beginning, the whole like, let's do some good, like that whole thing that went to shit, and he pulls out the umbrellas and all that stuff. That was like, and the fucking photographer, what a prick, right?
Yeah.
Like, oh, he's like standing like, oh, let me get the picture. But I liked how Elliot Ness owned his fuck up and like totally took the newspaper heading and put it in his office. I really liked that.
As
I thought
a motivator?
that was really cool. Yeah, as like a complete like I got to take this on the chin, you know, especially because he's just starting out. Like they just promoted him. So I liked that, and I really liked the fact that he owned it. But my God, give me somebody else other than Kevin Costner.
Do you think you would have liked this film if it wasn't Kevin Costner?
I don't know. I think if Kevin Costner was not in the movie and Brian De Palma didn't direct it, I probably would have enjoyed it.
I'm curious if everything else was the same, but Kevin Costner wasn't in it, you would have hated it less.
We'll never know, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's true. There were a lot of men who are considered for the role of Elliot Ness.
Oh, okay. Well, see, now when we get to that... But again, you know, the movie's almost 40 years old. It is very well renowned. It's very well revered. People respect the hell out of this movie. I don't know why, but, you know, that's me.
Yeah, and that's totally fair, and I really do like the conversations that we have when we don't like each other's movies. It doesn't happen that often, so it's nice when it does, just because we can talk about it. Now, I understand and agree with what you're saying. There are some, I wouldn't say pacing issues, continuity issues. The scenes jump from one storyline to another rather abruptly, and I can understand if you hated the score, how it would drive you crazy because the theme of the movie gets repeated a lot throughout it.
Yeah, and the whole thing when they're on the bridge between Canada and the U.S., that just, ugh.
But it's the 30s. Everything's just thrown together.
I understand that it's the 30s. I don't know. And Morricone he's obviously a gold standard in score writing, but the score just really rubbed me the wrong way. And like you said, a lot of the switching between storylines, which is interesting to say because that's the similar thing that I had a problem with Black Dahlia with Brian De Palma. Like there's like 5 storylines that you're trying to keep track of. But I also love movies and books where there's so many characters and they still, they show up here and there, like Cloud Atlas. I mean, that's a tough one.
Casino.
For a lot of people. Casino, yeah, Goodfellas.
Heat.
Godfather. Heat. Exactly. Dark Knight. I mean, Inception. Like so many characters. But I don't know. It just fell flat for me.
Totally fair. I really love it because it feels like a period piece, and I like that it's a bit different way to tell a story. This isn't some action-oriented gangster film. While there is good action in it, it is very character-driven in a lot of ways, and so if you hated the characters, it's understandable why you would hate the movie.
Yeah.
You didn't even like the stairwell scene?
No, stairwell scene was good.
Okay.
It just took too long to get to something engaging for me.
That I totally understand, and that's the thing I thought of as soon as you said there was a pacing issue. I was like, oh, I bet he thought the stairwell scene took way too long.
It did. And again, it's not the end of the world. I do like, we've talked about this many times, we like our slow burn movies. Mm-hmm. This was 2 hours that felt like 4 with nothing happening.
I respect your opinion, and that's one of the reasons why I'm glad that you decided not to text me with a veto so that we could just talk about it.
Yeah, for sure.
So now I want our audience to tell us who they think is right and who is wrong on this movie.
Well, I'm going to tell you right now, everybody's likely going to come down on me hard for this one.
It's a little forgotten. It is beloved, that's true, but
yeah,
a lot of people have forgotten about the film, so maybe it's a good opportunity for them to revisit and let me know if maybe they don't think it holds up.
Maybe. I know the 4K did just come out, I think, over the last year, and in a few of the 4K groups that I'm a member of on social media, this was like a major, monumental moment for them, and I was like, I've never seen that movie. Like, oh, bro, you gotta see it, bro. And now that I have,
it's
I'm
not
a
a 4K that you're going to be owning.
Oh, no, that's for sure. So my wife will be happy that I'm not buying another movie.
I'll take credit for that.
I walked out of my theater room just kind of like with my head down, and she was like, how was it? I was like, babe, I hated it.
No, it's fine. That's fine. I'm happy to hear that you have an opinion one way or another, so no worries. So speaking of Kevin Costner and how much John hates him, here are a couple other movies he's been in.
Well, again, I liked Field of Dreams. I thought that was a very good movie, and I liked Kevin Costner in it.
Which was my pick for episode 8.
Yes, and I had seen it once before, and I liked it before the podcast. So
yes.
I don't hate everything that Kevin Costner's in.
Kevin Costner's also in another baseball movie called Bull Durham, which I actually rewatched recently. I didn't enjoy it as much this time around. I think it's a little bit dated nowadays, so I probably won't watch it again. But it's another baseball movie because everybody knows Kevin Costner's obsessed with baseball movies.
Yes, he is.
I don't recommend revisiting Dances with Wolves. I don't think it holds up. My sister doesn't think it holds up. And if you're not a huge fan of Kevin Costner, you might as well skip it.
I think you might be right. Yeah. This was one of those moments like, I probably won't ever watch Dances with Wolves now.
A movie I do want to revisit, though, is Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves.
That's at least 2 that I do like. That one is a good one.
The Bodyguard?
Never saw The Bodyguard.
Oh, it's going to be on the list then. It's a rom-com. Or at least
is it a rom-com?
It's not a com, but it's certainly a romantic movie.
I was going to say, it's a rom-drom.
It's a rom-drom, exactly. He's also in Tin Cup with Rene Russo, a movie.
Oh, yeah.
And then some movies that I don't like. He's in the DC movies Man of Steel, Batman vs. Superman.
Oh, that's
As Jonathan
right, yeah.
Kent. Those movies suck.
Yeah, they're not very good.
He also is in Hidden Figures, Molly's Game, and more recently, he stars in the show Yellowstone.
I don't remember him in Hidden Figures at all.
He's the boss, remember? He asks her why she takes so long to go to the bathroom.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
And he does the whole coffee pot thing.
And
takes
down the bathroom sign with like a hammer or something.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yes. All right. Okay. So there's some movies out there that I like Costner in.
Well, another movie that's actually on the list is called Open Range, which he directed and stars in along with Robert Duvall. It's very good, so that'll be on
Western.
the list. Yep, and his newest Western called Horizon is actually going to be a 2-parter released this summer and fall.
That's right, yeah. Well, I'll check out Open Range first and decide if I want to go spend that much time with Costner, because I've never watched Yellowstone and I don't have any interest in ever watching Yellowstone.
Fair. The first season or so was good, and then it's been kind of downhill since then.
Ah.
Sean Connery we've spoken about twice on this show.
Oh, yes, we have.
He was in my first ever Father's Day pick, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade in episode 10.
Yeah.
He was in your pick of Dragonheart, episode 19. Well, his voice was, at least.
His voice was that voice.
He was James Bond in my personal favorite James Bond for a whole lot of films.
I've only seen one Sean Connery James Bond movie, so I'm looking forward to seeing some more.
Which one did you watch?
Octopussy.
That is a Roger Moore
Well, shit.
James Bond movie.
So I guess I've not seen any Sean Connery James
Great.
Bonds.
I will introduce you to them. No worries.
Oh, man. I'll bet our James Bond fan base is like, what
Their
the
heads
hell?
just exploded. For
Sorry,
shame.
everybody. Yeah, that's a Cersei Lannister walk through getting shamed at moment right there.
That was a serious film faux pas, buddy.
That really was. Oh, gosh.
Oh, no. All right, so moving on to some of his other works then. He's also in some classic films, The Man Who Would Be King, A Bridge Too Far, Highlander, which does not hold up at all.
Oh, does it not?
Well,
I've never seen it. I've heard it's so badass, though.
it is badass, and if you go in there reminding yourself that it's an 80s action movie, an 80s fantasy movie, then you're going to have a great time. The soundtrack's by
Okay.
Queen. It's just so ridiculous in a lot of 80s ways.
I gotta see this movie.
Oh, yeah. The Queen soundtrack in and of itself is probably worth watching, so...
Definitely.
Yeah, I watched it I think a year or two ago, and I was just like, oh my god, this movie is so ridiculous. It's great though, you're right. And then Sean Connery was also in The Hunt for Red October.
Yeah.
The Rock, which is going to be on our list probably this summer.
Welcome to the Rock.
Entrapment.
That was me. That wasn't Sean Connery.
I know, I told you have a really good Sean Connery voice.
I love The Rock. I can't wait to do that one.
He's in a film both of us love called Finding Forrester.
Yes. Oh my gosh. That movie, so good. F. Murray Abraham, too.
Yeah, and he also appears in Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves in the last, 45 seconds of the movie.
That's right. I wonder how much money he got paid for that.
That role was actually uncredited, and he was paid $250,000 for it in 1991.
Wow.
Yeah. Andy Garcia, as we said, is another member of Elliot Ness's crew. He plays George Stone, and he's been in some movies that I liked. He was in Stand and Deliver. He's in the Oceans movies, which he's great in those movies.
He is pretty good as Mr. Benedict.
Yeah, I loved him in Oceans 11, especially.
Oh, yeah. He was pretty good in Ocean's 11.
He's in a movie that you tried to pick that I vetoed called Smokin' Aces.
That's right. He is. Oh, yeah. I like Smoking Aces.
We really like him in Ballers.
Oh, that's right. He is in Ballers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He
that
shows
is
up
such a
in
good
season
show.
3, I think.
Yep.
He's good.
Yep.
He was in the Ghostbusters with Melissa McCarthy and Kate McKinnon. He plays the mayor. And then he also plays the captain of the ship in a movie called Passengers with Chris Pratt and Jennifer Lawrence that I think is actually really good.
I remember enjoying Passengers. That was a fun one.
Robert De Niro, of course, was in Stardust, my pick of episode 4. Captain Shakespeare, one of my favorite roles of his. And he was also in Heat, my pick for episode 60.
Yeah.
Robert De Niro, of course, is legendary and has been in a ton of films, so I just wanted to mention a couple of my favorite roles of his. The Godfather Part 2, of course, which I need to introduce you to.
That you do.
Cape Fear, A Bronx Tale, Copland, Sleepers, Analyze This, Men of Honor with Cuba Gooding Jr., which is so good.
I've heard that one's a good one, too.
How has your grandfather or father not made you watch that film yet?
I am not entirely sure, honestly.
I'm legitimately shocked that you've never seen that film.
Yeah, still never seen it.
Oh, it's very good. And he's in a great heist film that is actually on my list called Ronin, which I'll introduce you to in the future.
Ronin is badass. He's also in another heist movie.
That's right,
you have seen
Ronin. It. God, I keep forgetting you've seen that film. It's so fucking good.
I own Ronin, actually.
Yes.
That's a great one. And another heist movie he's in with Edward Norton called The Score with Marlon Brando. That's a pretty good one, too.
God, Edward Norton is so good at playing such a weasel.
Yeah.
Patricia Clarkson plays Elliot Ness's wife in this film. She's actually an amalgamation of Elliot Ness's 3 wives in his real life.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they never actually mention her by name in this movie, and her credit is Ness's wife.
Oh,
which is so lame.
Wow.
Yeah. And Elliot Ness was married to 3 women named Edna, Eveline, and Elizabeth. So apparently he liked women whose names started with E in real life.
Apparently so.
But this is actually her first ever movie she ever did.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So this was Patricia Clarkson's introduction.
Very
And
cool.
she plays the mom in Easy A, my pick for episode 64. And it's one of my all-time favorite portrayals of a mom ever. I loved her so much in that film.
She is pretty great. I enjoy her majority of the time she's in a movie.
Me too, because she was in Jumanji. She played his mother in flashbacks. Or when he was a
that's
young
right.
kid, I mean. And she's also in The Green Mile, Far From Heaven, Miracle, the Kurt Russell movie about the U.S. hockey team.
Oh, I heard that one's a good one also.
Yes, Good Night and Good Luck. And she also appears in another one of my picks, Shutter Island.
That's right. Good Night and Good Luck's a good one. I like that movie.
It is.
And Shutter Island's damn good.
Good Night and Good Luck is one of the few George Clooney directed movies that I like.
Ah, all right.
David Mamet wrote the script to this film that John hates. David also wrote the adaptation screenplays for The Verdict, Glengarry Glen Ross, The Spanish Prisoner, Wag the Dog, and Ronin. He wrote the screenplay.
Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah. And Brian De Palma, as we discussed, directed this film. He also directed Carrie, the original with Sissy Spacek, which is so good that John hasn't watched yet that I need to introduce him to in one October.
Now.
No, that's classic. It's amazing. He also directed Casualties of War, Bonfire of the Vanities, Scarface, as we said, Clarlito's Way, Mission Impossible, the first one, Snake Eyes with Nick Cage, and a sci-fi movie that I think is really underrated that's really good called Mission to Mars.
Oh, Mission to Mars. Yeah, Liev Schreiber and Gary Sinise.
Yeah, and Tim Robbins.
That's right, Tim Robbins. Yes, I saw the movie in theaters. I remember thinking it was all right, and I don't think I've ever seen it again. I remember leaving the theater and being like, that was a trippy-ass movie.
It is. I thought it was very original.
Yeah, and it was PG. It was
Yeah,
like
I couldn't
one of
believe
those,
that.
I couldn't either. I remember my whole family, we went. My parents did not like it, but my sister and I thought it was pretty cool, if I remember correctly.
Okay.
I know I did.
Yeah, maybe it's time to rewatch it. Instead
It might
of
be.
Dances with Wolves. Don't try to rewatch it.
There we go. I'll watch Mission to Mars.
And Ennio Morricone was the composer of this movie. He has 534 composer credits in his career, which is just bonkers to me.
That is mind-boggling.
Some of my favorites, though, are The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Very iconic score. The Thing, which is awesome.
Yes.
Once Upon a Time in America and Once Upon a Time in the West.
Oh, interesting. Oh, I've not seen either of those.
Oh, okay. And The Mission with Robert De Niro. Scorsese,
yes, of course.
Film, and The Hateful Eight.
That's right.
Yeah.
And a lot of his scores are sung by Jack Black in my pick of The Holiday.
That's right. I love that scene so much. And Albert H. Wolff was the last survivor of the real-life Untouchables. As I said, this is based on a true story. And he was a consultant on the movie and helped Kevin Costner with his portrayal of Elliot Ness, a role
cool.
you said makes him a big pussy.
Whoops.
Yeah. I don't know if you noticed in the beginning credits of this film, which are awesome opening credits, by the way.
Yeah.
Wardrobe by Giorgio Armani.
I did notice that. Yeah. I said out loud, I was like, no way.
Yeah, so
That's pretty cool.
all 30s period clothing. Giorgio Armani fit everybody for it. But Robert De Niro actually tracked down Al Capone's original tailors and had them make him some identical clothing for the movie.
No way. That's pretty cool.
He also insisted on wearing the same style of silk underwear that Al Capone wore.
Oh my gosh.
Because De Niro's a bit method.
I would say so.
Yeah. However, of course, some creative liberties were taken in this movie. Hollywood's got to make it Hollywood, right?
Of course.
And in real life, Al Capone actually knew that killing a prohibition agent would just be a disaster. It would lead to more trouble, more attention, more heat on him. And so he had a non-violence order for all of his men concerning the Untouchables. They were not allowed to hurt these men or their families in any way.
Wow.
Yeah. He did repeatedly attempt to buy them all off, though.
Oh, I'll bet he did.
Yeah. Unfortunately for Capone, that did not work. However, there is one story saying he promised Ness to have 2 $1,000 bills on his desk every morning if he'd stop investigating him. And that was $30,000 in today's money.
Oh
He
my
promised
gosh.
2 of them every day. So
Wow.
$60,000 a day to stop investigating.
Damn.
Which I might have considered
I might
it
have
at some
bent
point.
my liberty. Yeah. Wow. I will say there was one scene that I could not help but laugh at, and it was the scene where Elliot Ness walks into the hotel where Capone is descending the stairs, and he starts yelling at him, and then he just totally like kid on a playground, like, "You want to fight? You want to fight?" Like, I just was like, what is this? Like, how is this real dialogue?
So maybe if Elliot Ness was a little bit more of a badass played by another actor, you would have enjoyed this film.
It's very possible. We'll never know, but pseudo-universe, I'm curious who was in consideration for Elliot Ness before Costner got the role.
Well, Don Johnson and Mickey Rourke were two actors who were considered for the role.
Oh, interesting. See, Don Johnson I could see, not because of his Miami Vice days. I've never seen Miami Vice, but...
Miami Vice, number one new show.
Number one new show. Oh, that's good. And Mickey Rourke in the 80s, I could be down with that.
He was good looking in the 80s.
Yeah.
Mel Gibson was also considered.
Ooh, interesting. I could pseudo-universe all three of those and see if the movie is any better with any of those three.
And Mel Gibson was really interested in playing Elliot Ness, but unfortunately he had already signed a contract with Warner Brothers to be in Lethal Weapon.
Oh, wow. And look at that. Lethal Weapon went on to have 4 movies, and The Untouchables only had 1 movie.
Exactly. Lastly, Jeff Bridges was also considered.
Ooh.
Young
I could
Jeff
totally
Bridges?
see Jeff Bridges.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I think he'd be
I
my
could see it.
favorite.
I think so. I think mine too. Him or Don Johnson I could go with, like, for sure.
John Johnson's always just seemed really slimy to me. Well, actually, especially because when he was in Tin Cup, he played a total douche in that movie with Kevin
really?
Costner.
I never saw Tin Cup. That's the golf movie.
He's basically Shooter McGavin in that movie.
Oh, all right.
Yeah. And the story of Al Capone pulling out that baseball bat at dinner, yeah, that really happened.
Ooh, yikes.
On May 7th, 1929, 2 of Capone's hitmen hatched a plot to kill Capone and take over the entire organization.
Whoa.
But Al was told about this plot and invited everyone to a dinner party, including these 2 guys,
Of course.
pulled out a baseball bat and beat them both to death.
Wow.
Then shot them both in the head, for good measure.
Oh, just in case.
Just in case. So that's the type of guy Al Capone was.
Yeah.
And speaking of the staircase scene, the baby in the carriage
Oh, yeah.
was the stunt coordinator's son.
Oh, look at that. His first stunt job.
And he was super cute.
Sure.
The baby was. And while Elliot Ness and his wife are listening to a radio broadcast program, since this is 1930, George Carlin gave his voice for that fake show in the movie.
Are you serious?
Uh-huh. That was George Carlin.
That's cool.
Yeah. So The Untouchables had a budget of $25 million, and worldwide its gross was $76 million.
Oh, all right.
Everybody likes this movie but John.
That's very apparent.
It was nominated for 4 Academy Awards.
Oh, wow.
Best Original Score.
Oh, that's too bad.
Best Costume Design. That makes sense.
Sure. Yeah, completely.
Best Art Direction, Set Decoration, which
Okay,
also
yeah,
makes
I'll give it
sense.
that.
Period pieces.
Yeah, it's very cool to look at.
Yeah. And Best Supporting Actor for Sean Connery, which he won, and it was his only win of his entire career.
Wow, he won.
He
well, good for him.
won. Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. And so that is The Untouchables. I'm so curious if our audience can tell us whether or not they're a fan, especially because John and I disagree on this movie this week.
Yeah.
Which is totally cool, and I'm happy we had an opportunity to have that conversation.
As am I. I'm glad that I've seen it. I can say I've now seen it.
Yeah, that's true.
And, it's gone down as one of the greatest crime dramas of all time, and
it is more of a
I
drama.
Don't see that. Yeah, but while I don't see that in any real shape or form, just on my end, I can understand why people like it.
Well, the nice thing is it isn't one of my deeply beloved movies where now the podcast is over, right?
Exactly, yes. We will be back for episode 107.
Exactly. Now, if you had said that about, say, E.T. or The Last of the Mohicans, then we'd probably have a problem.
Oh, yeah, I think so. There would be, we would have stopped a long time ago.
Or even The Last Crusade, speaking of Sean Connery.
Yes, speaking of Connery.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if you didn't like Dragonheart, we would have stopped right there.
It all hinges on Sean.
It really does.
Well, for our audience, you can watch The Untouchables for free if you have a Prime or Paramount Plus subscription. So at least
That
you
was
didn't
how
have
I
to
watched
pay for the film this week.
I was quite happy about 35 minutes in that I didn't drop $2.99 or $3.99.
There we go. So just small victories in life.
Yeah, we got to have some of them.
All right, so now it's time for us to fast forward about 40 years in terms of the storyline, not the time of this movie being produced.
Right.
And now discuss your untouchable gangster film.
All right, sounds good. Let's get into it. I did a film from 2007. This movie is 20 years, actually, after your movie came out, V.
That's right.
And this movie was set actually in the late 60s, early 70s during the Vietnam War. This movie is written by Steve Zalian, directed by Ridley Scott. This film stars Denzel Washington, Russell Crowe, Josh Brolin, Chiwetel Ejiofor.
One of my favorite names.
It is a very cool name. Idris Elba, Ted Levine.
Yes!
Yeah, Buffalo Bill, Silence of the Lambs days. RZA from the Wu-Tang Clan. Lamari Nadal, Ruby Dee, and an actress that just kind of keeps popping up over the last several episodes, Carla Gugino.
That's right, she does, and I couldn't be happier.
I know. And without further ado, I'll tell you what movie this was in case you didn't follow along with us. This movie is American Gangster.
How is this film as forgotten as it is?
I really don't know. I saw this movie in theaters opening weekend, and I want to say that I've seen it one other time since theaters, but it has been one of those movies similar to Constantine and so many other movies that I just remember from beginning to end. And maybe that's why I haven't watched it as much, is because like it was so affecting, you know, like it's just stuck with you. And the story is pretty insane. So watching it this time around, revisiting it after almost 20 years was really, really cool. And the fact that it's a Ridley Scott movie is another thing that's like, wow. You know, like you think Ridley Scott, Gladiator, Black Hawk Down, Alien, The Martian, you know, all these other movies. And this is one of those movies that not many people are like, oh yeah, he also directed American Gangster. So I hope we are introducing people to a movie that they may have never heard of or that they have just kind of forgotten about.
Similar to Super 8, I keep forgetting about this film and how good it is.
Yes, American Gangster is a very good movie. 2 hours and 40 minutes, and it really kind of flies by, unlike another movie.
Well, and I think that is really important to be 2 hours and 40 minutes long, because if there isn't all this exposition and setup of these characters, I don't think you'd be invested, and it'd feel very rushed if we jumped in midway through of this story. So I'm really glad he took his time in establishing these characters.
I completely agree. And without further ado, let's break down American Gangster. American Gangster opens up in 1968 with Frank Lucas being Bumpy Johnson's right-hand man. Bumpy Johnson was the head honcho of Harlem in the mid to late 60s. Very unfortunately, Bumpy Johnson does pass away, and some of the other rival gangs around Harlem are thinking that they now run the streets of Harlem. Frank Lucas, played by Denzel Washington, just epically, by the way, he starts to take over the streets of Harlem and figures out a way to start bringing in some of the best heroin that has ever been produced from Vietnam to the streets of the United States in Harlem. So Frank's actually got quite a large family. He's one of 6 brothers, and he's got a cousin that's actually in the army over in Bangkok during the Vietnam War. So Frank tells his cousin that he wants to fly out to Bangkok, meet up with the producer of some of the best heroin in Southeast Asia, and he wants to bring it back to America and start just peddling it on the streets. So he flies out to Bangkok, gets out there in the heroin fields and sees the whole operation and ends up making a deal with the producer of this intense drug. And again, this was set in the late 1960s, and we follow Frank Lucas throughout his whole operation from about 1968 to early 70s. In the process of all of this, we're meeting a bunch of different corrupt cops that have been on the payroll of other gang members. We're also meeting some of the straight-edge cops. Richie Roberts, played by Russell Crowe, who just shines in this movie. I love Russell Crowe in this movie so much. His life is a little bit in shambles right now. He's going through a divorce and a custody battle with his wife, played by Carla Gugino. And I think it's hilarious that she's now in like 3 movies that we've discussed over the last like 5 or 6 episodes.
Yes, well, one of them wasn't our pick, right? It was Lisa Frankenstein. She's just in it.
She's in it, yes.
She's much hotter in San Andreas than she is in this movie, though.
Oh, yeah, I completely agree.
Yes. Oh, God.
She still looks great, but
yes, of course,
she is much... Yeah.
The 70s were unflattering for just about everyone involved.
And you know what's crazy? Watching this movie, it reminded me very much of Zodiac. It seemed very authentic to the time period. And I think that's kind of the whole thing with New York, too, is like you can be on a street corner in New York and it could look like it's from the 1930s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. Even now, you know, it's like you're going to find the location you need on some corner of Manhattan, regardless of what time period the movie you're shooting is set.
That's funny you say Zodiac, though, because I could actually see Fincher directing this film.
Well, that's interesting you say that because he was originally attached to direct this film. He actually did not get the job because he and the studio were unable to come to an agreement on what the budget size should be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, seems like a Fincher thing.
Yes, very much so.
And a studio thing, of course.
Of course.
But yeah, Fincher was a little bit more established in 2007. This movie went into production like late 2005, early 2006. We also meet Josh Brolin's character, Detective Trupo. He's on the corrupt side of things in New York City. When we first actually meet him in this movie, Richie Roberts is trying to do a bust of some marked bills, and the bills leave New Jersey and go into Manhattan. These bills are handed over by these gangsters to these corrupt officers, and Richie runs up to him and is like, hey guys, those are actually my bills. They're in from Jersey, and he gives them the serial number. They look at them, they all check out, and then Trupo's like, hey, you know, if you ever want to come into New York, you better call me next time and make sure that it's okay with me. And like the way he does it though, he's just such a slime ball prick.
Oh God, he's such a snake.
That mustache is just ridiculous, and his
slick
back hair, and the suit that he's wearing.
Mm-hmm.
And then of course he gets into like this sexy ass vehicle, you know, and it's like this guy's a real piece of work.
It's a Shelby Mustang. That thing's sick.
Yeah, it was really, really nice. So at this point, while this is all happening, Frank Lucas now has his early buildings of a heroin empire on the streets of Harlem in New York City. And Richie starts catching wind of all of this and starts to build a case around Frank Lucas and everybody else that Frank Lucas is involved with. And Richie is now investigating Frank Lucas because he has been given the chance to build his own team of investigators to start taking down the drug-ring empire of Harlem and New York City. And similar to your film V, Richie starts to recruit people that he feels could be uncorruptible. And he builds quite the team. And they all start to really sink their teeth into this investigation and Frank Lucas. And in the process of all of this, Frank starts to recruit his family members into this business. And to show his family and his brothers, more importantly, how serious this whole thing is, he approaches one of the gangsters on the streets of Harlem and demands that he gets the money that he's been owed from him. And this is one of the most insane moments of this movie. I actually completely forgot about it, so when it happens, I just like kind of slammed back into my seat like, holy shit. Frank Lucas means absolute business. And his brothers do finally start to realize that Frank Lucas is on the verge of becoming a kingpin of New York City.
Mm-hmm.
I very much enjoy this movie. I think Ridley Scott did a pretty damn good job bringing this movie to life. I'll talk about how the production went down in just a little bit. Some of my favorite scenes are the dialogue scenes, especially when Richie is actually recruiting some of his team. I loved that whole sequence. I actually really liked a lot of the scenes early on before Richie gets the opportunity to build his own team, how gritty things really were starting to go for him.
Yeah, especially because being an honest cop, when he asked for backup and didn't get it, that was so messed up.
I know, that was really lame. Yeah, he's driving through Harlem and he's like, I need backup. And they're like, we don't have any cars over that way. You know, I don't know what to tell you. Sorry. And they just kind of like, fuck off. You know, best of luck to you.
Because when he turns in money instead of keeping it in a big bust, everybody at the station calls him a fucking Boy Scout. It's so gross.
So lame. And later on, while he's doing his recruitment for his own team, a couple of the guys are like, aren't you the one that literally just like gave up $1 million? And he's like, yep, that was me. And like continues on with his day. He's like, yeah, fucker, I did the right thing. You know, I abided by the law that I have a badge for. Go fuck me.
Exactly.
So V, I enjoyed the movie. Well, how was your revisitation of American Gangster?
I, too, saw it in theaters. I've seen it 3 times since then, so I've seen it a couple times in the last 20 years, and it was so fun to revisit because it's been a while, and so I forgot a lot of the movie, and it is a very involved storyline, but god damn is this movie so good, and I cannot believe more people don't talk about this movie, including us.
Yeah.
Denzel is so captivating. I am glued to my seat every single time he's on screen because he has this very calm exterior. But the scenes where he lets himself go and becomes violent are so brutal and good. And so you're just waiting the whole movie to see what the hell he's going to do, right? He's not
definitely
a loose cannon, but he has that anger and that power where when he wants to go off, he will. And you better watch out. And
he's like a time bomb.
He is a little bit like a time bomb. And I love the cast in this movie is insane. It's like watching Heat. Every single scene, there's somebody that you will recognize in this film.
Oh, yeah.
Great supporting actors, fantastic casting. I was very, very happy with it. It also reminded me how stupid the war on drugs is and how many lives lost there were because of it.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
One of my favorite scenes, though, is when he gets his whole family from North Carolina and they all move into that super wealthy neighborhood. And the next door neighbors are these two old folks who are like, oh my gosh. And they're just so scandalized that this big, boisterous black family is moving in next door. And I was like, hell yeah. I was so happy.
He just like points at him. He's just, I see you. I see you looking at me.
The soundtrack is great because it's got that 60s, 70s hits that we all love and perfect for this film. And through a lot of this movie, because it's Denzel, right? And because this movie's written so well, unlike my film, you actually root for the gangster in this movie.
I couldn't help myself. I just was like...
Well, especially because none of the cops are good. It's like, fuck all these guys. They're all bastards who were betraying their badge.
Yeah, and like you said, he's just so captivating, and his calm exterior is... It's just like any other movie that he's in. You just can't help but love to watch him and root for him. And going back to the authenticity of this movie, it feels real.
Oh, yeah.
Like, it doesn't feel like it's a Hollywood movie. There's a lot of things that happen in this movie that are like, oh, yeah, absolutely liberties were taken with the story of this movie. But there's just something so authentic about it. And it's not like all those other gangster movies where, Joe Pesci's going to go off or like one of Frank Lucas's brothers is, the hitman type. So there's a lot of things about American Gangster that are not cliche when it comes to the gangster type of cinema. And I think that's another reason why this movie is so good. And nothing against Goodfellas or Casino or anything like that. Those movies are masterpieces. But this movie, just watching Richie try to take down Frank Lucas and Frank Lucas try to evade Richie, there's a romance to it that you're just kind of like, I like watching this.
Absolutely. And isn't this movie based on a true story?
It is based on a true story, yes. Frank Lucas actually was very excited about this movie coming out because, hey, why not? Why wouldn't you be?
And he was still alive when this movie was made.
He was actually still alive when the movie was made. Frank Lucas just died in 2019, so he's only been gone for 5 years. I know that Frank Lucas was very excited about the movie, as was the real Richie Roberts, but they've both been on record saying that the movie takes quite a lot of liberties. So, and
Fair.
of course it does. Of course it does. I'm sure Goodfellas and Casino do as well, and you said the Untouchables did the same thing. So, you have to Hollywoodize it, you have to build it up, but at the same time, I like the story that we're watching, and I'd be curious, I haven't done the research yet, but if there's a book written by either of these guys, I would very likely read it.
Absolutely, me too. And watching this film, talking about rooting for Frank Lucas, all I could think about through a lot of this movie, though, was The Lion King and Scar when he goes, I'm surrounded by idiots. And that's what I'm thinking through a lot of this movie because, of course, Frank Lucas is an incredibly intelligent man, but you can't hire people exactly like you, right? You have to hire from the people you know, the people you trust. And so there are a lot of times in this movie, same with Richie's side, especially in the beginning of this film, where you're just like, oh, I wish they had better support or better partners or whatever just to help them with their goals.
Absolutely, yeah. And since this is based on a true story, like I just mentioned a few minutes ago, Frank Lucas and Richie Roberts were excited about the movie coming out, but they criticized how much liberties were taken with the story. Russell Crowe really wanted to nail Richie Roberts' persona and mannerisms and his voice, so he requested to get as many recordings of interrogations of the real Richie Roberts that he could get. And he spent hours upon hours listening to these. So Russell Crowe ended up really nailing Richie Roberts' mannerisms, voice, and Richie Roberts has gone on record saying that he's done a very good portrayal of himself.
Nice.
Yeah. And another crazy thing about the production of this movie, when they went to Bangkok, they did go to Bangkok.
Cool. I've been to Bangkok. It's awesome.
I've never been. Maybe one day we'll go to Thailand, but we never know.
Great food. Nice people.
Oh, that's actually all I've heard. I love Thai food.
Yeah, the authentic Thai food's really good.
Now, when they were shooting in Bangkok, the production was able to hire a bunch of background for the heroin farms where Frank Lucas goes to try and, make this deal with the producer. Everybody that you see on screen was actually part of the distribution during the 60s and 70s.
Whoa!
Yeah. So there's a little bit of authenticity in that few minutes, which is really fucking cool.
That is.
Do you imagine they're like, oh, we're making a movie about something that you were involved in 30, 40 years ago?
Well, then you know that they're pretending to make heroin the right way you make heroin, right?
Exactly. Yes, exactly. And shooting in Thailand actually was 5 days.
God, that's not that much at all.
No, not at all. And if you think about it, there's not a whole lot of time in Thailand, in Bangkok.
Yeah.
But still, 5 days, so they all went over there. It's not, the Universal Backlot or anything like that. They were actually there
like
getting the authenticity.
Pete's Dragon.
Exactly, yeah. And the other 73 days were shot all over New York City.
Awesome. I'm so glad they actually shot in New York.
As am I. Ridley Scott has said that this is one of the most intense undertakings of a movie that he's done.
Really?
Yeah, I know. Isn't that interesting? The reason for that is because there were 360 scenes for this movie.
I was figuring because there's so many people in it.
Nope, that wasn't the reason.
Okay.
It was the 360 scenes shot in over 180 different locations.
Oh, shit. Yeah, that would be stressful.
I can only imagine, especially in a 78-day production shooting schedule.
Whoa, that's like Nightcrawler numbers.
Yeah, exactly. The original cut was 3.5 hours long. I want to see that cut.
Hell yeah.
I would very much enjoy seeing a 3.5 hour cut of American Gangster. I don't think it's on the DVD or the Blu-ray. I don't know if a 4K might be coming. I really would like to see that, so we can pray to the cinema gods that maybe one day we'll get the opportunity to see that.
Mm-hmm.
Russell Crowe, like I mentioned before, in this movie, he and Brad Pitt were Ridley Scott's two choices to play Richie Roberts.
I mean, Brad Pitt does a really good job playing a spy in the 60s and 70s in Spy Game, so I can picture him in that era, but I don't think he's gritty enough to be a New York City detective who is completely ostracized by all of his peers.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you on that one. And we've mentioned this before, we like Brad Pitt, but I don't think he could have. I just don't think. I think there would have been too much comedy involved in his character.
Russell Crowe is also a bit of a bulldog in this movie, and a lot of that is because of his physicality.
Right.
And so I think that's a better fit.
Yeah, that makes sense. That works. James Gandolfini was offered the role of Detective Trudeau, played by Josh Brolin. I could see that for sure.
I could totally see that.
And I love Josh Brolin, but in the pseudo-universe...
Good.
Yeah, he really was. But I think Gandolfini could have really killed that role, too.
Oh, yeah, totally.
And I've never seen The Sopranos, but I've seen James Gandolfini a few times in other movies, especially James Gandolfini in The Incredible Burt Wonderstone with Steve Carell and Steve Buscemi.
I've never even heard of that film.
Oh, it is a terribly hysterical movie where they play magicians on the Las Vegas Strip. It is not a good movie, but it makes me laugh really hard.
It doesn't sound like a good movie.
I'm going to tell you right now, because it's not. Now, I mentioned to you earlier, because you brought him up, David Fincher was attached to direct this movie at one point. Antoine Fuqua was also attached after David Fincher left the project. I think that would have been killer.
Yeah, it would have been more violent.
I think you're right. I think it definitely would have. Now, Antoine Fuqua, when he was attached to direct, it was Denzel Washington and Benicio del Toro playing Richie Roberts.
Oh, hell yeah, I could see that.
That would have been so bitchin'.
Mm-hmm. Have you ever seen Savages?
Yes, and I hated Savages.
But he is so good in that film.
Oh, he's great. Yeah. No, that's the thing. Benicio can make a movie a little bit better with his presence. And I mean, that's, I never really thought he'd go into the Marvel universe, but I do like him as the Collector.
That's right.
When Denzel and Benicio del Toro were attached to the movie with Antoine Fuqua as director, the movie ended up getting canceled, which really sucks. But both actors got paid because they got their pay or play contract. Denzel Washington got his full fee of $20 million without having to make a movie. Benicio got his fee for this movie at $5 million. So Benicio walked away $5 million richer, movie or no, which, what a deal.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then later on, when the movie was greenlit again, Washington did not have an upfront fee. So he still got paid, but he didn't get paid as much as he did originally.
But he still double dipped on this movie.
Oh, yeah, he absolutely
Hell
did.
yeah. Oh, my God. See, when we talk about a movie needing to make at least double its budget in order to be profitable, it's this kind of behind-the-scenes bullshit that we are talking about.
Yeah.
That
The
studios
pay or
will...
play stuff is
it's
nuts.
fantastic. I think that's great for actors. I'm not saying that. But it's these stupid decisions by the studios when they, cancel films that have already been made or cancel a film that is in production and then they change their minds a year later and it's like, great, we just pissed away $25 million.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Another director that was in talks to direct the movie was Peter Berg, and Denzel Washington and him had a few meetings, and Denzel Washington gave him the thumbs up and would have been totally fine with Peter Berg directing, but that never came to fruition either.
Peter Berg is a really good director. I was really shocked.
He is.
He's previously an actor and has gone behind the camera. He directed Friday Night Lights and a couple other films. I think he even directed a war movie that I was a fan of, but I can't think of the name right now.
Yeah, he directed Lone Survivor.
Thank you. Yes, I knew there was something there.
Lone Survivor is,
good movie.
Oh my gosh, amazing. Heartbreaking, but fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
When Antoine Fuqua was attached to direct, Ray Liotta was in talks to play Richie Roberts, other than Benicio del Toro as well.
That would have been cool.
I could have totally seen, especially after Narc and, Ray Liotta, rest in peace. And this is the second time that Russell Crowe and Denzel Washington have worked together. V, can you name the movie that they were in together? Early 90s. Russell Crowe was the bad guy. I've never seen it, but it has been on my to-watch list, I think, since 2001.
I can't think of the film.
It was Virtuosity.
Oh, gosh, yeah, would never have thought. I've totally forgotten about that film.
And I have not seen it. Maybe one day when we're hanging out, we should just watch it.
Sure.
This movie was released on November 2nd of 2007. I went opening weekend. My buddy Kings and I went and saw it at the Regal Theaters because anytime there's a Bad Boys movie or a Denzel movie, my buddy Kings and I would go see it.
Nice.
We both walked out of there being like, hell yeah, this movie is absolutely badass. We weren't old enough to drink yet, so we couldn't go have a beer and discuss it, but we did go to Johnny Rockets and have a burger and discuss the movie there.
That sounds good.
It was pretty good. This budget, V, what do you think the budget for American Gangster was? Ridley Scott, Steve Zalian, Denzel Washington, Russell Crowe.
Yeah, especially because you were saying that everybody was being paid their full freight.
Yeah.
I would say $85 million.
Ooh, you are very close.
Finally.
You're $15 million off.
Okay.
It was a $100 million budget.
Nice. Yeah, I'd been off lately, so it's good to finally guess one closer.
Opening weekend brought in $43.6 million. The domestic box office, domestic box office was $130 million, and the worldwide box office came in at $269.7 million.
Hell yeah!
So it did pretty damn good, and how could it not? It's a great fucking movie.
I mean, a rated R gangster film, those can be hit and miss, right? Because it's not like families are going to go see it, so that's very impressive.
Right, especially for the year 2007, which had a lot of family-friendly films in the top 10 highest-grossing films of 2007.
Which you've done before.
I have done the year 2007 before, so we'll just get into a few of the movies that were highest-grossing. Spider-Man 3 was number 1, Shrek 3 was number 2, Transformers was number 3, Pirates at World's End was number 4, number 5 was Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, and number 8 was Ratatouille. So a whole bunch of family-friendly films. And another movie that we actually discussed very recently when we were talking about Nightcrawler and Prisoners, No Country for Old Men, came in at number 59. And another pick of mine at number 75 was Clive Owen, Chiwetel Ejiofor, Julianne Moore in Children of Men. And the 19th highest-grossing film of the year 2007, coming in this week with my pick of American Gangster.
Fantastic.
Yeah, it did pretty good. I'm quite happy to hear that it did so well in theaters and happy that I was a part of the box office smash.
I'm so glad you picked this movie.
Me too. It's so funny because I was telling a lot of friends of mine in the bourbon community on one of my threads. I was like, yeah, I just watched The Untouchables. I hated it. And they all just sent me, the Get Out gif. And
Shame.
You don't know what you're talking about. I'm like, all right, fine. I was like, I picked American Gangster and oh, that's a great movie. I'm like, yeah, I was going to go cliche with either Goodfellas or Casino or another gangster movie that I really enjoy. But American Gangster is truly an underrated, masterful gangster movie. And I'm so glad that we were able to revisit it on this movie. I hope we reintroduce people that may have seen it when it first came out and just have never watched it again. It is worth the 2 hours and 40 minutes of your life. It's awesome. It's not a happy movie, but it is a great movie.
It really is. And where can you watch this movie?
Currently, you can watch the 4K restoration on HBO Max, which is how I did it, because I don't own this one yet, which is strange to me. So when the 4K comes out, you know where it's going to land.
I also watched it on HBO Max. It was very high quality.
Yeah, it looked really damn good.
Mm-hmm.
So that is American Gangster, my pick for episode 106. Thank you guys so much for listening. And V, would you watch The Untouchables with your grandma?
I actually would.
Oh, interesting.
There's a couple of violent points, but since she was a cop, since she was born in the late 20s, it seems like it could be a movie up her alley. I've seen this movie with my dad, I think.
Oh.
But I would recommend it to anybody who enjoys cop films or gangster films or movies set in the 30s.
Yeah, there you go.
And John, would you watch American Gangster with your grandma?
I don't think Grandma would have enjoyed American Gangster.
It's a bit intense.
It is. Yeah, especially the opening 4 minutes of the movie.
Denzel certainly comes out swinging.
Yes, he absolutely does. Thank you guys so much for joining us for episode 106, Untouchables and American Gangster. Check them out if you haven't. Definitely worth a watch on both of them, even though I did not like The Untouchables. It is a movie I feel people should watch.
Appreciate that.
Absolutely. Next week is going to be a complete blast. I can't wait to get into these movies because, V, I've only seen yours once, but I've seen mine an endless amount of times, and it still makes me laugh hysterically to this day. V, do you want to tell everybody what we're doing?
Very excited to go this route, especially because the last 2 episodes have been a bit heavy, so we decided to do some comedies.
Yes.
I have seen my film so many times I can't even count. My sisters and I loved this film growing up. It was released in 1995. It stars Chris Farley. I picked Tommy Boy.
Nice. I have literally seen this movie one time.
I cannot believe that.
I can't either. It was one of those movies that when it came out, I wasn't allowed to see it. And I was always very upset about that because even when I was in elementary school, people would, friends of mine would come back from the weekend and be like, I just saw Tommy Boy. Has anybody seen Tommy Boy? And like half the class would be like, I saw Tommy Boy. And I'm sitting there like, no, I haven't seen Tommy Boy. So I really only saw Tommy Boy for the first time, I want to say within the last 10 years.
Wow. Well,
yeah.
We'll see if it holds up with your rewatch of it.
I'm excited.
Yeah, I'm so glad because I'm so excited to watch this movie again. And you can stream it on either Pluto TV or if you have a Paramount Plus subscription.
Oh, okay. Cool. Then I'll watch it on Paramount Plus.
And what Chris Farley comedy are you watching?
I chose a movie that came out 2 years after yours, starring Chris Farley, Nicolette Sheridan, and Chris Rock. This movie is Beverly Hills Ninja.
I've never seen it.
Oh, I can't wait for you to see this movie. My wife likes this movie.
Okay.
Which is
impressive.
Insane to me. Yeah.
Exactly.
There was one night we were sitting around. I was like, you want to watch a comedy? She goes, yeah, sure. What are you thinking? I'm like, I don't know. I usually let my wife choose a comedy because I always would rather go like Jim Carrey or something like that, something vulgar and raunchy. But one night she was like, do you want to watch Beverly Hills Ninja? And I looked at her, I was like, hell yeah, I want to watch Beverly Hills Ninja. This movie makes me laugh very hard. It's classic Chris Farley. Available on Netflix if you don't have a DVD copy, but I do, so I will watch my DVD copy.
Awesome.
Yeah. So thank you guys so much for joining us again for episode 106. Please do rate, review, subscribe. Join us on all social medias, TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. We're on all of them. I'm very curious how many people are going to come down on me for me not liking The Untouchables. We'll see. But that's what this whole thing's about, right?
That's right.
All right. Well, V, it's time to close out. And as we always do, close out Movies You Miss podcast with film as a form of art. And in art, all opinions are valid. Except if you think.
John and I have to agree on movies.
Ha ha! Nice. As we certainly didn't this week.
No. And we're still friends and actually planning on doing another episode next week.
That's very true, and I can't wait for that episode next week, but I also can't wait for the social media bashing that I am sure to endure over my opinion of this week's choice of yours, V.
Well, maybe that means I'll get more fans.
Maybe.
Don't worry, I'll still be your friend.
I know. As long as I have one, I'm okay.
Exactly.
That about wraps us up here for episode 106 at Movies You Miss Podcast. Thank you guys so much, and we will see you guys next week. Cheers, everybody.
As John's last remaining movie friend, bye-bye, everyone.